welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefanía Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South. Cuba has released video evidence of the terrorist attack on its embassy in Washington, D.C. that occurred on April 30th. Foreign Minister Jorge Rodriguez held a conference on Tuesday in which he recounted the details of the attack. He noted that the suspect, Alexander Alazo, approached the embassy and shouted offensive phrases. Alazo went on to throw a desecrated Cuban flag at the embassy railings before trying to set it on fire. Shortly after, he fired 32 shots at the embassy located a few blocks away from the White House with a semi-automatic rifle.
This is a terrorist action committed against our diplomatic mission in Washington that cannot be seen as a separate issue, but as a result of the aggressive policy and discourse of the government of the United States against Cuba, the hatred speech and the permanent instigation to violence by U.S. politicians and extremist groups, anti-Cuban extremist groups who have turned these sort of attacks into a way of life.
Minister Rodriguez confirmed that the shooter had visited the Cuban embassy 2 weeks prior to the attack.
It is known that Alazo planned the attack with enough time beforehand that he visited the crime scene prior to the attack for exploratory purposes, and this happened around 2 weeks before the attack. At the moment of the attack, he declared himself as a follower of the current U.S. president. You already saw the signs desecrating the Cuban flag and wrapped himself up with the flag of the U.S. He didn't put up any resistance when he was arrested, as you have just seen in the video images. We appreciate negligence in the behavior of the U.S. government, which did not act in the face of information of such nature. Mr. Alazo had visited the law enforcement agencies. He had a license to bear weapons. He was the owner of a Glock handgun. During the period previous to the attack, he managed to get an AK-47 rifle, and 2 weeks before, as I said, made an exploration at the place where the embassy is located. The U.S. government did not comply with its obligation to prevent this attack.
And lastly, Rodriguez mentioned he hopes the United States government is coherent with their fight against terrorism by investigating the terrorist attack against the Cuban diplomatic office in Washington, D.C.
We are still waiting because the government of the United States, we hope that they go through with their obligation in regards to the international agreements. We will appeal to any international instance of human rights. Unless there are evidence results, we will continue with our denounces. Of course, we will keep on guaranteeing the security of the U.S. in Havana, of their diplomats, and of all of the other diplomatic agencies. We hope that the government of the United States is coherent with what they say against terrorism and their policies of fighting terrorism with their responsibilities with a terrorist attack that has happened against a diplomatic office in downtown Washington. Thank you very much.
Moving on, protests in Bolivia have spread to other working-class areas of Cochabamba following Monday night's road blockades. People are demanding a return to work after being left hungry by the regime during the lockdown. Mobilizations are not organized by any local group or social movement. Residents say that hunger has forced them to come out. Some residents say the government should resign as they're, quote, killing us through hunger. Residents of the Caracara neighborhood of Cochabamba were met with police and military repression as they demanded the right to food and income from the de facto government under the strict quarantine which has been imposed across the country. The night left an unknown number of people injured. Moving on, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has announced that the country has received yet another shipment of medical supplies from China. Foreign Minister Jorge Rodriguez received the shipment at the Maiquetía International Airport. He thanked China for its continuous solidarity with the Bolivarian people and the government. President Maduro provided an update on the COVID-19 situation in Venezuela. Over the last 24 hours, Venezuela has confirmed one new case of COVID-19 in the state of Aragua. The president also signed the renewal of the state of alarm decree for 30 more days. Venezuela's government is releasing new details regarding the maritime incursion and foiled coup plot involving U.S. mercenaries and the Venezuelan opposition linked to Juan Guaidó. Among the evidence presented by Minister of Communication Jorge Rodriguez are video statements by captured terrorists who admit to having contact with U.S. Silver Corp mercenary Jordan Goudreau and the Venezuelan right wing.
En la Asamblea Nacional el pasado 30 de abril.
Antonio Sequea, deserter, traitor to the homeland, who robbed weapons from the detachment of the National Assembly on April 30th of the previous year. It was he who got fugitive from Justice Leopold Lopez from his residence and took him to the buffoonery of the Altamira distributor on the 30th of April of 2019. He was the operational boss of the criminal landing mission on the coast of Macuto on Sunday the 3rd of May. Well then, Antonio Sequea submits to a voluntary confession and we are going to hear part of his first testimony. Go ahead, video. Mid-March, when Juan Guaidó travels from Colombia during the tour which arrives later to the United States, Jordan distanced himself communicationally from us. We went some time without telephone contact. Later we went back to connecting and he tells me that he was in a meeting with Juan Guaidó in the White House, that he reaffirmed once again as a military advisor for the ousting of the regime in Venezuela. That gave us a bit more strength. It motivated us to continue the operation, given that 1 year before we had seen Jordan behind the security of President Trump and then he was advising us militarily. That gave us, it made us believe the feeling of security to continue advancing the operation.
The contract to invade Venezuela with U.S. mercenaries reveals a military plan, but also a political project that seeks to overlap the Venezuelan constitution. Let's have a look.
This is a social housing project where its own residents participate in its design and construction. For 9 years now, they have been working towards building their own houses, but they're also militants of the Bolivarian Revolution. Under the contract of invasion signed by Juan Guaidó and the U.S. company Silvercorp, these people would have been a military target of the mercenaries.
All the Venezuelan population, not only the members of the local production and supply committees, CLAP, but all of us are targets. Because when these people sign the contract, they say that any site that they may feel is a threat could become a target, allowing them to destroy it and even have a license to kill.
These women are spokespersons for food and basic services committees. They're also political leaders considered hostile by the invasion forces. Their crime, in the eyes of the signers of the contract, is to defend a political project that would be annulled.
We are aware that at the time of an invasion, the first ones to be attacked will be the popular power, the people, the communities, because we have defended the right for life. The Venezuelan people are peaceful, but we are also aware that we are not backing down.
They call for a political dispute within the framework of the Constitution.
There is a group of Venezuelans that are not happy with the revolution, and we can understand that. And they may have their own reasons. We respect that. But we have a constitution. We live in a democracy where they can vote for their candidates. They have that option if they want a way out of the revolution.
The best way to defend the revolution and to defend power is through elections. You want to participate, defend what you believe in, because we believe in popular power and in the political participation of the people.
The leaked document is a military manual to impose a political project in Venezuela.
This is an example that a plan goes beyond overthrowing a government or ending a country's political project. It is an expression of the United States foreign policy, where it's in control, not only of the natural resources, but also of the markets.
The Venezuelan constitution is one of the main victims in this contract. It creates public powers and foreign military commands which lead national forces.
These are elements in which the country and the state are subject to this instrument that has no part in the legal system. For example, the selling of oil companies. The Bolivarian National Armed Forces would also cease to be an organism subject to the President and the Minister of Defense and would be subject to a transnational force of action.
This document reveals how this sector of the opposition views Chavismo as a force to be eliminated without taking into account human lives.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Some countries in the Caribbean are preparing to ease travel restrictions implemented to stem the spread of COVID-19. Grenada will be allowing regional travel as agreed upon by CARICOM.
At the most recent emergency meeting of CARICOM heads and OECS heads, we collectively agreed to start gradually relaxing the restrictions for travel, as the pandemic in the region has been largely contained. Governments, airlines, and the hotels are now finalizing the details of this phased reopening, assuming that the requisite protocols are in place. We therefore expect to open our borders in the first week of June.
Belize is preparing to reopen its domestic tourism market come Monday as the country approaches its 28th day of no new coronavirus cases. This includes allowing locals to walk on the beach, swim in the sea, or lounge in pools at hotels.
Of course, the social distancing requirements will remain in place so that group swimming and group strolling, if you will still be prohibited. This domestic tourism push naturally raises the issue of our opening up to foreign tourism. We are clearly not there yet, and my best guess, my personal best guess, is not before July.
The Cayman Islands is slowly loosening its coronavirus restrictions, having sent out thousands of workers last week. More employees will be approved to resume their duties if the country's COVID-19 figures remain controlled.
We released some 6,000 workers back into the workforce, into circulation last week. And so, following the protocols that have been recommended by WHO, we are waiting 2 weeks before we release another significant sector of the economy and put more people back, even more people back into circulation. So we've gone through 1 week of that now, so we go through this week. And the objective of doing it in that way is to be able to see what impact the release of additional people into the workforce and into circulation generally will have on the profile of the virus in the community.
The government of St. Lucia is focusing on building infrastructure and climate sustainability as part of its medium-term development strategy and says it will serve as a stimulus as the country looks to bounce back from the effects of COVID-19.
We think that some of what we tried to achieve try to remedy structural issues in the economy that has been there since post-independence. And so essentially, pre or post-COVID, this will remain. And so the government needs to still continue these initiatives. However, we see the MTDS now being positioned as sort of coming and give a stimulus during this time. So it's really about the issue of timing. If we fast track some of these initiatives, particularly infrastructure projects, we have a very ambitious road infrastructure project. And again, building climate resilience to infrastructure. We have a hurricane season is just around the corner. So we see the medium-term development strategy now doubling up as a sort of a stimulus in the short term by providing an injection of resources into the economy through capital projects, but also helping us and putting us on a platform that we could have a quicker recovery.
Thousands of Jamaicans overseas have applied to return home using an app. The government says it is reviewing applications and asks for patience throughout the process.
In respect of the controlled reentry program, advise that we have close to 7,500 applications now through the Jam COVID app and website. And I will just use the opportunity to reiterate that because of the number of applications and because we are managing controlled reentry based on the amount of quarantine and isolation capacity which we have in Jamaica, there will not be an immediate response to your application. You will get your case number. That means your application is submitted. You don't have to keep applying in order to hear from us. Once you have a case number, it is received, but the process, the time that will take you to get to conditional approval and ultimately to approval, where you would have made travel arrangements, will take a bit more time. So we're asking again, yes, for your patience and understanding.
Jamaica is looking to reopen bars in the near future with some specific regulations which must be maintained and which are subject to an assessment following a period of 2 weeks.
Tomorrow we will give notice to all operators of community bars. We're asking these bars to take into consideration the protocols that are being outlined as to how they will commence operation within the framework that I'm about to announce. We are expecting that when the announcement is made, that bars will be open from 11 a.m. commencing the 19th of May and will remain open for 2 weeks.
Churches will also be able to open beginning on May 16th, also with numerous health and distancing requirements.
We're proposing that within a context agreed with the faith-based community, the physical distancing rules to apply within the sanctuary or worship space. And that is, we expect that a ratio of square footage to persons will be maintained. That is 1 person per 40 square feet. So this will determine the number of persons that will be in the church space at any one time. They should ensure that there is no overlapping of the service. So one congregation comes in for a particular service, they leave, give enough time so that they can sanitize the church hall, and then another congregation comes in for their second service or how many other service they wish to have.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. In Honduras, the economic crisis is deepening after 2 months of quarantine and a growing number of people that are going to the streets to demand food. Experts suggest that levels of poverty will rise by 5% as a result of the situation.
More than 2,000 residents of Colonia San Francisco in Tegucigalpa arrived at the Maximiliano Kolbe Church, where leaders of the Libre Party were giving away whole chickens in order to meet the nutritious needs of some Hondurans.
It is a bit difficult because not even in Chamba can you get any, and so we are suffering a lot.
None of our 3 sons are working.
The crisis has begun to economically asphyxiate more than 30% of the population, which dedicates itself to informal commerce and which is now restricted by the closure of the city and the rest of the country as a consequence of the social quarantine for COVID-19.
There are things which, if they don't establish adequate parameters in order to gradually recuperate in an organized manner with clear lines on behalf of the state, the crisis situation can become explosive as hunger worsens as a consequence.
According to the forecast by economic experts, the levels of poverty, which have nearly risen to 70% of the population, can grow as much as 5% with the crisis, which the country has seen due to the pandemic.
If one grabs an item at a time, without a doubt the figures for poverty, which we will see at the end of this year, will be at least 5% more than what we have currently. This could become 450,000 people living in poverty. At this time, there haven't been measures applied.
Honduran government authorities announced measures to assist some 300,000 families which are without income. But in the cases in which they have given food, the recipients have said that it was not sufficient.
They need to give a cash subsidy because, as you know, we have a lot of necessities to pay for water, for light, to pay the telephone. Imagine that I owe 3 months without light, and we don't know what we are going to do.
Labor laws have not been able to protect more than 150,000 Hondurans who were fired during the recent weeks from factories. Meanwhile, 70% of jobs depend on the survival of tiny and small businesses.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov has been hospitalized after testing positive for the novel coronavirus. Peskov is quoted by local media saying, "Yes, I've gotten sick, I'm being treated." The 52-year-old has been Putin's spokesman since 2008. The gravity of his condition remains unclear as Russians who have the virus but display light or no symptoms are allowed to stay at home. His hospitalization could be an extra precaution or a reflection of the severity of his illness. India's enormous railway network has been grinding back to life as a gradual lifting of the world's biggest coronavirus lockdown gathered a pace even as new cases surged. On Tuesday, hundreds lined up to enter the New Delhi railway station.
Feels really good. I was over here from last 45 days, from the starting of this lockdown. So it was quite difficult because we are also working over here, right, to the offices. So it is quite difficult because staying away from the family and everything, it is quite difficult over here.
And I'm a student, so before that I was away from my home a month also at my hostel. And it's been 3 months for me to reach my parents. So it's been very mentally, I want my parents now.
As the world celebrates International Nurses Day, healthcare workers mobilized outside a hospital in Cape Town, South Africa, to criticize the country's management of the pandemic. Donning protective masks, the group gathered outside the Tygerberg Hospital, one of South Africa's coronavirus testing and isolation sites. Essential staff, including nurses, cleaners, and porters, denounced the lack of medical equipment and transportation to get to work. This as 86 nurses have contracted the virus in Western Cape, while 2 have died to date. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.